Elizabeth McNagan, who is surrounded by beautiful pink roses as she explains that she has apparently been reincarnated. She has all the memories from her past life and has been reborn as the eldest daughter of a duke. She is honestly quite shocked at how beautiful she is and recalls from her past life memories the concept of otome game reincarnation. While she stands by a desk, she thinks that this new world feels just like one of those games, but she faces one massive problem. Looking distressed, Elizabeth reveals that she has basically never played an otome game, as the only games she ever liked were a different type. A lovely color image shows Elizabeth in her red dress, smiling and holding hands with a handsome, blonde-haired young man in a white suit, standing outdoors among roses with a grand building behind them. Back in her thoughts, Elizabeth considers the basics of these otome game reincarnation stories, knowing they feature a heroine, her capture targets, and a villainess who gets in the way. She reflects that in most of these stories, the person is reincarnated into a game they have already played, but she has never seen this world's towns or maps in any game she knows. She also knows the villainess is usually engaged to a main capture target, and she muses on the idea of a fiancé swatting away pests from her future spouse, which seems like a rightful claim. Elizabeth sits in an armchair in a large library, reading a book, and concludes that this world is either from a type of story she never read or it has nothing to do with any game at all. As images of books float by, she realizes that even if this is the stage for a story, she simply does not know the plot. With a look of determination, she decides she has no choice but to just live her life as she is. Later, Elizabeth is seen sitting on a couch in a formal room, facing her father who is in an armchair. Her father calls her name and tells her he has something important to say. Elizabeth looks up and questions what it could be. In a close-up, her father informs her that her engagement has been arranged. He explains that her new fiancé is Lord Leonard Francis Belcrane, who is the crown prince of their country. He tells her to prepare herself as they will be going to the royal castle to meet him, pausing to ask if she is even listening. Elizabeth, after a moment of silence, erupts in a classic villainous laugh. She internally connects the dots. Being reincarnated as a high-ranking noble's daughter combined with a political marriage to the crown prince must mean this is a villainous reincarnation scenario. She gives a mental salute and decides she has no choice but to play along, wondering what else a 5-year-old beauty can do. At the royal castle, which Elizabeth notes is huge, she sits at an outdoor table and observes her surroundings with a tactical eye. She sees that the trees are perfectly lined up and that there are clear spots with great views mixed with perfect hiding spots. A small, sweating version of her thinks someone overthought the design, as her main takeaway is that an assassination here would be a nightmare. Her father calls her Ellie, just as she spots the prince approaching. Her gamer brain immediately wonders where a sniper would set up, before she reminds herself that guns likely don't exist in this world. A voice then tells her to raise her head. Elizabeth looks up to see the young, blonde-haired prince smiling down at her. The prince, wearing exquisite white silk gloves, offers his hand while Elizabeth curtsies and thanks him for receiving them. He thanks her for coming and says he wanted to speak with her directly. Elizabeth internally panics, wondering if she is allowed to touch his gloves. She hesitates but quickly decides that leaving him hanging would be even ruder. As she takes his hand, her mind races, analyzing him. She notes his stance is perfect and flawless and his smile is so polished that it seems suspicious, making her rethink her imaginary sniping plan. She observes that while his smile seems gentle, his eyes hold a hint of caution. She finds him blindingly clean, like detergent white, and feels she could never get along with someone so pristine, since she isn't a saint herself and would prefer someone a bit shady. The prince asks if she is Lady Elizabeth, and she politely confirms her name. Now seated, the prince mentions he already knew her name but wanted to meet her in person. Elizabeth, smiling, replies that it is her utmost honor and that he flatters her. She internally worries her wording is too mature for a 5-year-old but also thinks that beautiful men are a true blessing. The prince confirms her age, noting she is only 5, which she affirms is correct. He introduces himself as Leonard Francis Belcrane and asks her to call him Leon, explaining it is only right since she shared her name. Leon adds that since their engagement is arranged, he wanted to spend time talking with her. Elizabeth smiles, replying that she is not sure if she can be so informal. Leon tries to make small talk, asking if she is familiar with popular dress styles. Elizabeth thinks about her mother's dress, realizing it's the only style she knows, so she cannot say if it is trendy. He then asks if she has a favorite flower. Elizabeth considers this and thinks that while flowers are pretty, she has no special attachment to them unless, of course, they are edible. Leon, looking a bit lost, just says, "I see," and tries a new topic, things you like. He suggests things young ladies normally like, such as dresses, jewels, or flowers. Elizabeth thinks about this and has a sudden, embarrassing realization. A diagram appears showing her actual interests, RTS games like Nobunaga's Ambition, edible flowers, and wild herbs. Elizabeth is mortified, thinking she doesn't care about any of those typical, girly things. She realizes Leon is just trying to have a normal conversation and she has completely derailed it. Sensing her hesitation, Leon asks if she reads books. Elizabeth confirms she does, and he asks her to honestly tell him about the last book she read. She replies that she has been reading The Rise and Fall of the Dimine Empire, explaining it is a history text about the empire's collapse 400 years ago that analyzes it from diverse sources. Leon just stares at her, completely dumbfounded. Elizabeth internally admires how gorgeous he is even when confused. Her father jumps in, explaining to Leon that his daughter is not interested in typical children's stories and that she read fairy tales once before abandoning them. Elizabeth objects, saying that is not true and brings up the Princess Rivia's crown, which she calls her treasure. She gushes that it is a picture book by a famous artist with an exquisite binding. She proudly states she owns the original edition from 2 centuries ago and even has it on a special display stand in her bedroom. Leon comments that she must treasure it as an art piece, and Elizabeth happily agrees. She then adds that before that, she read Eternal Agasia. A diagram shows this book is a massive, 10 cm thick hardcover nicknamed, "a fine blunt weapon," that could be used as a pickling stone. Leon is shocked and asks if she really read that. Elizabeth confirms she did, though it took her a month. Leon asks if she wants to be a historian, but Elizabeth says no, explaining she just reads for entertainment and because she feels like it. She mentions that after Eternal Agasia, she got interested in the Dimine Empire and read more about it. Leon sighs, and when Elizabeth asks if it's rude to sigh, he just repeats the word, entertainment. He turns to her father and admits that the Duke's daughter is beyond his comprehension. Her father replies that the family has already given up trying to understand her, which makes a small Elizabeth think her dad is being harsh. Leon then smiles warmly at Elizabeth, promising that next time they meet, he will prepare something she might like. Elizabeth beams and says she will look forward to it. A later image shows a thoughtful gift, a replica bracelet from the Dimine Empire ruins, implying time has passed and he kept his word. After a year has passed since their engagement, Elizabeth thinks about their upcoming betrothal banquet. She and Leon sit on a couch as he explains that after the banquet, all nobles will officially recognize her as the crown prince's fiancée. Elizabeth listens intently, understanding the implications. Leon clarifies that from that point on, she will be treated as royalty and breaking the engagement will be nearly impossible. Leon looks at her seriously, noting that while 1 year isn't long, it also is not short, and it was a year spent by his side. He acknowledges they forced her into this role without her consent and tells her this is her final chance if she is unhappy. He then asks her directly if she will accept becoming his wife. Elizabeth thinks to herself that this is the point of no return. Looking at Leon, she feels that if she is with him, she can face whatever comes. She wonders what she will do now that her retreat is gone. With sudden determination, she thinks, "Then I'll carve a path forward." Moved by her expression, Leon responds that in that case, he will clear the way for her and asks her to walk that path with him. Elizabeth smiles and corrects him, saying no, they should carve it together and walk it together. Leon agrees that she is right. He stands and offers his hand, asking if she will grant him the honor of escorting her for the rest of his life. Elizabeth smiles brightly and takes his hand, replying that his wish is her command, as the murmur of the banquet crowd is heard. At the banquet, guests congratulate Prince Leonard and Lady Elizabeth on their engagement. Leon thanks them politely as Elizabeth holds his hand. Nearby, guests murmur that they were surprised the Duke's daughter was his fiancée and that they did not expect children to be present. One guest whispers that even for a political match, surely there were better choices for His Highness. As Elizabeth overhears this, a look of realization crosses her face as she thinks, an event flag has appeared. An unknown person looking through a pair of binoculars, watching Elizabeth and a man sitting at a table from a distance. The observer is revealed to be a young Prince Leonard, who is then asked by an attendant if he is sure that girl was the right choice. The story shifts to Leonard's perspective, flashing back to the spring when he turned 7 years old and officially became the crown prince, shown sitting on a grand throne. He explains that after discussions with his parents, the king and queen, his engagement was arranged with the Duke of Macnagan's daughter, who was 4 years younger than him. The McNagan family, while influential and ranked third among the 5 ducal houses, was known for rarely speaking out. As an image of the Grand McNagan estate appears, Leonard recalls that their family motto was peaceful neutrality because they disliked conflict. Even while many other nobles were pushing their own daughters forward for the engagement, the McNagan house said nothing at all. Young Leon, sitting at his desk reviewing the final documents, thought they were a very strange family. He remembers meeting the Duke, who smiled and told him the engagement could be annulled at any time if his daughter did not please him. Leon found this to be a very unambitious stance for the head of a powerful family. Months later, Leon was sighing over a report about Elizabeth. It turned out she had spent a large amount of money, equal to the cost of a modest dress, on an oversized and thick collection of ancient battlefield maps. When questioned, she insisted it was necessary because she wanted to study them to see if more efficient strategies could have been used. Leon smiles at the memory, realizing that Elizabeth truly lights up when discussing anything related to battle. He even recalled that at their very first meeting, she had been studying the guard's formations. He then saw her happily praising a guard, telling him his formation was outstanding. Leon understood that her father had offered to annul the engagement because he feared his daughter was just too eccentric. Sometime later, Leon was summoned to a sitting room by his parents, the king and queen. His father asked him how the past year since his engagement to Lady Elizabeth had been. Leon paused, then recalled a time Elizabeth suddenly said she wanted to try holding a sword. He let her hold a practice blade as a test, and he and other boys watched as she held it correctly and swung it. Although he planned to never let her touch a sword again, he soon found her deep in conversation with the knights about sword-making, suggesting specific adjustments. Her only complaint was that the child's practice sword was a little too big for her. Leon's father realized that this was the reason for a recent sword modification request from the knights. Back in the present, Leon tells his parents that Elizabeth is not just intelligent. He explains that while she looks delicate like a fairy, the things she says are shocking and she is very energetic, but she is never arrogant. He admits she is unpredictable and he wants to continue watching her up close. His father then asks if he will accept her as his future wife. Leon smiles and confirms, yes, stating his wish to take Elizabeth as his bride. He explains that she was at first just a political partner, but now she is the one he truly wants. The story jumps to the day of the official engagement ceremony. An announcer introduces Crown Prince Leonard and his fiancée, Lady Elizabeth, as they descend a grand staircase into a hall full of guests. Leon asks Elizabeth if she is all right, and she smiles, assuring him she has calmed down a little. They are soon approached by a group of young girls who offer their congratulations. Leon mentally notes he did not invite any underage guests and figures they were sent by their parents to size up his new fiancée. One of the girls, who wears a large bow, speaks up, saying they were very surprised his fiancée was Lady Elizabeth. She suggests that even for a political match, there were surely more advantageous partners, implying herself. Leon calmly interrupts to ask what, specifically, she would consider advantageous for him. The girl blushes and says that she could love him sincerely and cherish him for life. Elizabeth looks completely baffled by this, while Leon just bursts out laughing. He points out that if it is just sincere love, she doesn't need to become his wife to do that. He adds that it would be terrifying if she went too far and started appearing everywhere he went, a thought that makes Elizabeth shudder. As the girl stammers, Elizabeth gets an idea, complete with a ding sound effect, while Leon tries to hide his laughter. The girl with the bow challenges him, asking what advantages Elizabeth could possibly provide. While Leon thinks about the benefits of being Ellie, Elizabeth is seen trying to create a nickname for the girl, thinking, Pink Lady? No. Big Ribbon Lady? Leon accidentally overhears and mutters, yes, Dribbon Lady, then immediately covers his face in embarrassment, realizing he just nicknamed her. Changing the subject, he turns to Elizabeth and asks what benefits she brings as his fiancée. The other girl scoffs, asking if love doesn't count. Elizabeth, after a moment of surprise, composes herself. She clarifies that while it may not be the same love the other lady described, she does respect his highness and finds him admirable. When Leon asks if she truly means it, she replies that she would gain nothing by lying and that she admires him because he has no glaring flaws. Leon smiles broadly, feeling that he has been valued very highly. Elizabeth smiles back, saying she is glad if he truly finds her admirable. As Leon looks at her gentle smile, he has a realization and wonders if this feeling could be romance. As they prepare to leave the party, he asks if she is tired and offers to let her lean on him. Elizabeth politely declines, saying she wants to stand and walk on her own 2 feet as much as possible. The narration then switches to Elizabeth as 2 years pass. She is now 8 and the prince is 12, and they have maintained a slow, steady relationship. Elizabeth's mother asks her about preparations for the Queen's upcoming tea party, which is being held in the royal gardens. Elizabeth has been put in charge of managing the children's section for all the young noble ladies. A to-do list shows her tasks, which includes sending invitations and arranging seating based on political factions. Elizabeth is stressed, thinking this is as much work as wedding prep and a total energy drain. She sits with Leon, who encourages her, but she thinks about the heavy burden. If she fails, it will bring disgrace to her, her family, and ultimately the royal family. Leon then calls her Ellie, and she mentally quizzes herself, realizing he is displeased because she is being too formal when they are alone. She quickly corrects herself and calls him Mr. Leon, mentally scoring herself points. Leon smiles and offers her a cash-in reward. Once the tea party is over, he will take her to the White Birch Tea House on Haphazardly Street. Elizabeth immediately brightens, excitedly asking if he promises. This tea house serves her absolute favorite fruit forest cake, which she lives for. This promise gives her a huge motivation boost, and she thinks to herself that she is definitely falling for him, or rather, already likes him seriously. Leon finds her reaction adorable as she declares it is time to give it her all. The chapter ends comically, with Elizabeth shown slacking off and staring at the sky while someone yells at her to act like a duke's daughter. A happy Elizabeth, fork and knife in hand, ready to dig into a table piled high with delicious cakes and tarts. She cheerfully introduces herself, explaining that it is a beautiful day for the tea party being hosted by Her Majesty the Queen. As other ladies are served by maids in the background, Elizabeth, surrounded by flowers, announces that she was put in charge of the children's section and is ready to give it her all as she welcomes her guests. At the children's table, guests begin to arrive. Lady Susanna Wimes, an earl's daughter, arrives with her mother and seems happy to be there. Another guest, Lady Florence Aristo, the daughter of the first ducal house, stands with her arms crossed and merely says, "Likewise." Elizabeth internally recognizes Florence as the driven lady from 3 years prior, noting her hair is now styled into impressive drill curls. Florence, who clearly still dislikes Elizabeth, huffs and walks off. Elizabeth muses that Florence still hasn't accepted the engagement and believes she will be the one to marry the prince, wishing she would use that energy for something positive. Elizabeth decides it's best to keep her distance and just make it through the event safely, surrounded by plates of cookies. This plan fails immediately as Florence is heard yelling. A conflict has broken out between Lady Florence and Lady Susanna. Florence is complaining loudly that she would be a better match for the prince and that Elizabeth's taste in tea is trash. Susanna, looking annoyed, retorts that all she said was that Lady Elizabeth would never say such rude things. The argument escalates into a full-blown fight. Florence pulls rank, yelling that Susanna is younger and should respect her as a duke's daughter. Susanna shouts back that Florence needs to act like an elder if she wants respect. Helpless to intervene, Elizabeth's mind drifts into a fantasy sports commentary world. Commentator Elizabeth and announcer Elizabeth observe Lady Florence lunging at Lady Susanna, who refuses to back down. The announcer's main observation is that, impressively, not a single one of Florence's drill curls has come loose during the scuffle. Back in reality, Elizabeth just pleads with them not to hurt each other. Her Majesty the Queen arrives, smiling, and suggests the ladies should cool their heads. Elizabeth, standing beside her, realizes this was the Queen's plan, as Her Majesty had insisted on seating those two together. The Queen holds a fan that reads, "A hungry child must be taught patience," and Elizabeth thinks she looks just like her son, Leon. Later, Elizabeth sits nervously in a room, while Florence pouts, the Queen smiles, and Susanna looks down in shame. Elizabeth suffers from a stress-induced stomach ache as the Queen begins her questioning. She first addresses Duchess Aristo, asking her daughter's age. The Duchess confirms Florence is 11. Elizabeth internally panics, feeling the temperature in the room drop as she imagines the Queen's unstated disappointment in how an 11-year-old heir is behaving. The Queen then turns to Countess Wimes, noting that her daughter, Susanna, has a strong sense of justice. She asks Susanna's name and tells her that while her spirit isn't bad, she must learn that charging head-on into every wall will only get her battered. When the Queen asks Elizabeth for her input, Elizabeth says she has nothing to add. The Queen points out that Elizabeth was left helpless and that if she had been injured trying to stop the bigger girls, it would have been a much worse incident. Susanna then offers a sincere apology for the trouble, which Elizabeth mentally awards 10 points for its genuineness. The Queen accepts her apology. Next, the Queen asks the daughter of Duke Aristo for her apology. Florence forces out the words, "I am deeply sorry," but text appears on her face declaring her unrepentant, which a smiling Elizabeth clocks immediately. The Queen's expression darkens. She addresses Florence not by name, but as daughter of Duke Aristo, and bans her from the palace for 1 year to relearn her manners. Elizabeth mentally cheers, "Strike 3, as Florence is shown the outdoor. Once in the hallway, Elizabeth stretches, exclaiming how refreshing the air is. Leon appears and calls her name, and an attendant congratulates her on a job well done. Leon says he has prepared sweets for her as a reward and asks his mother, the Queen, if he can borrow Ellie. The Queen agrees, telling him to praise her well. Leon adds that he also prepared her favorite elderflower cordial and that they must plan their trip to the White Birch Tea House. At the tea house, which has a chic interior and beautiful decor, Elizabeth sips her wine-like cordial and prepares to eat a brandy-soaked fruit cake. She tells Leon she feels restored after the chaotic tea party battle. Leon praises her for handling her first hosting job so well. Elizabeth mentions she noticed there are many children Leon's age, which she learned was due to a pregnancy boom started by the Queen years ago. She then asks Leon if he already knew Drill Curl, referring to Florence. Leon almost spits his drink, shocked at her new nickname. He denies knowing her well, saying he only met her a few times. Elizabeth marvels at how Florence's curls didn't move at all during the fight. She then jokingly declares a mission to sneak into the Aristo house to learn the secret, but Leon immediately forbids it. He then grows serious, apologizing for using her as bait to draw out rivals for the fiancé position. Elizabeth, drawn as a cat, happily tells him to use her as bait anytime. Leon takes her hands, promising to tighten security and make sure she is never harmed, explaining he couldn't bear it if anything happened to her. Elizabeth blushes, thinking his words are unfair. As they leave, she tries to hop off the high stool but nearly falls. Leon catches her, scolding her for making him nervous and telling her to use a stool next time. As he helps her into the carriage, Elizabeth reflects on how cherished he makes her feel and how she wants to support him as his fiancé. Suddenly, she gets an idea. Both Leon and his attendant notice her scheming expression. She waves it off as nothing, all while mentally plotting her Operation Handcrafted Maiden's plan. A new narrator, Noel Gray, who is standing in a library with Prince Leonard. Gray explains that 4 years ago, he was appointed as the chief of Prince Leonard's personal guards. He takes his duty to protect the prince very seriously, noting that a guard must have good sword skills and the ability to make split-second decisions to ensure their ward's safety. Although guards are normally close in age to their ward, Prince Leonard personally appointed Gray, a decision that annoyed others who wanted the position to climb the ranks. Gray feels blessed, as he and his men have great pride in their work, and the prince respects that dignity. Gray continues his thoughts, explaining that another important factor for guard knights is appearance. Since they often deal with nobles, they must not look intimidating. He thinks about his handsome colleagues, Alphonse Norman and Pierre Dion, who draw the attention of ladies, sparing him the trouble. As Gray assigns posts, Dion smiles and asks if Lady Elizabeth is scheduled to visit, explaining he wants to earn her approval and be prepared. Gray confirms she is not expected, and he reflects on what an extraordinary person she is. He was shocked when he realized that during her very first visit, she had been observing the guards' formations. He also muses that Prince Leonard, who is brilliant to an almost unsettling degree, has become much calmer and even smiles more since Elizabeth entered his life. Gray finds it strangely easing when Elizabeth's antics leave the perfect royal speechless or make him laugh, as it makes the prince seem more like a boy his age. Just then, an attendant announces that Lady Elizabeth requests an audience. Leon grants her entry, and she comes in, now wearing her hair in pigtails. She cheerfully greets the two guards, Norman and Dion, before beaming at Leon and asking if she passed. He smiles and confirms she did as always. Gray internally notes that a visit from Elizabeth means one thing for the guards, a workout time. Elizabeth presents Leon with a small, tied bag, announcing Operation Maiden's Handmade Project. She explains that as a lady, she felt she must attempt to make sweets at least once to show her gratitude. Leon, looking highly doubtful, asks if she made them herself. Elizabeth confirms she did, but clarifies that the bag contains prototype cookies. Leon and the guards are baffled by the term. She explains that she followed the maid's instructions perfectly, viewing cooking as a science, but somehow the cookies became astonishingly hard. She demonstrates by clacking two together, which make a sound like charcoal. As Leon and the guards look on in horror, Elizabeth adds that this is the best batch she has ever made and they are perfectly safe to eat. However, despite all the sugar, butter, and eggs she used, they are also completely, inexplicably tasteless. Leon can only stare and mutter that it's a solid miracle. Elizabeth then reveals this is her first and final masterpiece, as she practiced for a whole week before she was banned from the kitchen. Hearing this, Leon calls the cookies a rare treasure, which causes Gray and Norman to struggle to keep from laughing. Leon announces he will try one. He struggles to break the cookie with his bare hands, then resorts to pulling a paper knife from his desk. He strikes the prototype cookie with the knife, shattering it with a loud crack that is heard outside the room. The death cookies, as they're called, are later shared among the knights, completing the training squad's duty for the day. Time passes, and Elizabeth is now 10 years old, while Prince Leonard is 14 and on the verge of becoming a young man. During one of their regular tea times, Elizabeth asks Leon if he will be taking the entrance exams for Steinforden Academy. He replies that he won't be taking them this year. When Elizabeth asks if he knows which school he'll attend, he smiles and says he would like to attend together with her. Elizabeth is surprised, so a small teacher Ellie appears to explain the school system. There is Cockford School for Commoners, North Pole Girls' Academy for Noblewomen, and Steinforden Royal Academy. Steinforden is a co-ed, super-elite school for both nobles and commoners, equivalent to a college. It is notoriously difficult to get into, accepting only 40 students per year based purely on merit. Elizabeth assumed Leon would be taking the exam soon, as most nobles apply at 13 or 14. She wonders if she is really going to Steinforden. Leon explains that Steinforden doesn't have many female students, and he would be worried about leaving her there alone. He asks her to take the exam with him, either next year or the year after. Elizabeth is so overwhelmed by his charm that she can barely speak. Later, in the Royal Palace Library, Elizabeth is studying for the exams. She worries about the tragic outcome of him passing and her failing, but Leon confidently assures her she will pass for sure. She then struggles with the application essay, which requires her to write about what she wishes to study. Sir Grey is on guard duty. She asks him if he likes madeleines, which immediately makes him recall her shockingly tasteless prototype cookies. Elizabeth catches his expression and jokes about writing her essay on why her sweets always fail. Grey dryly points out that since they don't know the cause of the failure, the essay would have no conclusion. Elizabeth replies that ending it with further research required might work, but Grey reminds her she's banned from the kitchen. Elizabeth pouts that his comment stings, even though she knows he means no harm. Ellie and her companion, Grey, are in the library, where a young man with dark hair and glasses abruptly tells Ellie to please keep her voice down. Ellie quickly apologizes, admitting to herself that they were indeed being too loud. However, she also privately thinks the man seems very prickly, and wonders what he gains from his sharp attitude, as he seems to be shouting to the world how hard to please he is. She decides to just dismiss him and move on. The prickly man then addresses her again, asking if she plans to resume reading and condescendingly names the advanced book she holds, Carl Smith's Theory of Market Economics. He then adds that he doubts she would even be able to understand it. Ellie is left speechless, thinking he is a first-class brat for trying to show off. His rudeness continues as he states that none of the books she has are appropriate for a girl to be reading. This comment confirms Ellie's suspicion that he is a first-class brat, and she finds the whole encounter exhausting. Meanwhile, Grey reflects that while their country isn't strictly male-dominant, people with such outdated thinking still exist, and he recalls how that very book sparked a heated debate in his own economics class. He concludes that it is best to simply ignore people like this. Ellie wonders what to do about the kid, noting that his insults towards her, a person of high standing, were already enough to be punished. She then realizes the man hadn't even noticed Grey's official uniform, a fatal oversight for anyone working in the royal castle. As Ellie watches from the doorway, the man with the glasses finally sees Grey properly and becomes visibly flustered. Ellie thinks he is too late and is shocked at how narrow his vision is, having only just realized Grey's high status. She then turns to Sir Grey and politely asks him to have the librarian check out the books, as she will read them in her room. Later, Ellie is seen discussing stress relief with Prince Leonard, mentioning that some people say baking helps. The prince, holding one of Ellie's legendary cookie, weaponized, playfully asks if his own baking is truly hopeless. He smiles and lists other ways to relax, suggesting that exercise works well, or perhaps a long bath, a nap, or eating something you love, all while performing a legendary shin smash. Ellie just thinks to herself that he cut her off mid-sentence. Reflecting on the library incident, Ellie decides to just forget the rude man and ignore him if they ever meet again. The conversation then shifts as Prince Leonard announces that he has finally chosen his new attendants and would like Ellie to meet them. Ellie is surprised, shocked that he didn't have any attendants until now given his heavy workload. Leonard explains that he had several candidates and wanted to test them first. He tells a confused Ellie that she helped with this process more than she knows. She nervously wonders if it was her cookies that helped, but he gives a quick reply that her cookies were unrelated. Leonard then formally introduces his attendants. The group includes Noel Gray, his chief personal guard knight, Paul Nelson, the son of the kingdom's largest trading house, Hendrik Orchard, heir to a marquis and the prince's cousin, and Robert Arist, heir of the Arist ducal house. Ellie is stunned to see Robert, instantly recognizing him as the brother of Drill Curls, and remembering the incident that caused trouble for the Arist family. As Robert politely bows, Leonard mentions he is very capable. Suddenly, Ellie has a shocking realization. She connects the dots and figures out that the prickly guy in the library must have been one of the attendant candidates. Beside her, Prince Leonard just smiles knowingly. The story then jumps forward in time. After months of diligent study, Ellie finished her essay, secured her exam ticket, and took her written test. She receives a letter confirming she passed. Elizabeth, now 12 years old, is overjoyed. Starting in May, she will officially be a first-year student at the prestigious Steinford Royal Academy. To celebrate, her family throws a party, which her mother proudly named Ellie's Congratulations on Passing. Ellie warmly thanks her mother and father. Her father expresses that he is also glad His Highness passed and wishes the prince could have attended the party, but he was unfortunately busy with a visiting ambassador from an allied nation. Servants bring in gifts, including one from His Highness as well. Ellie opens the gift from Prince Leonard while her mother watches eagerly. Inside is a magnificent necklace. Ellie is absolutely thrilled, as she recognizes it is modeled after artifacts from the ruins of the Agasia Great River civilization belonging to the Holy Makiae Empire. Her parents watch her happy reaction, and her father remarks that His Highness knows her incredibly well. Ellie examines the necklace closely, noting that the original artifact had diamonds and a ruby center, but this replica uses blue tourmaline instead. She realizes the blue stone is the exact color of His Highness's eyes. When her mother asks what the inscription on the back says, Ellie blushes deeply and just says she will ask the prince about it later. She thinks to herself that she cannot possibly read it aloud in front of her parents. She knows the original necklace was a proposal token inscribed with the words, "To my beloved," and she realizes Prince Leonard had the inscription changed to read, "To my Ellie." She finds this incredibly embarrassing, thinking that his affection has become very overt this past year and that it's unfair how he just keeps getting more handsome. Just then her older brother, Elric, arrives to congratulate her. He hands her his own gift, telling her to use it well. The gift turns out to be a kiss ticket and a date ticket, both marked as Ellie exclusive. Ellie deadpants, asking if she can just tear them up. Elric leans in close, suggesting she can use them today if she wants. In a flash, their mother steps in and rips the tickets to shreds. Ellie shouts in surprise, but her mother calmly tells her, "You didn't see anything." The scene descends into chaos as Elric wails for his mother to stop while she continues to tear up more tickets. A caption explains that Elric Macnigan looks like a beautiful boy but is actually a ciscon deviant obsessed with Ellie. Amid the chaos, Ellie's father, Thomas, sits down and gravely states that one problem remains. He explains to the worried household staff that Elric also passed the exam and will now be at Steinford Academy, right alongside His Highness. This, he declares, means the odds of disaster are very high. A flashback reveals the history of Elric's obsession. When Elric was 3, he kissed a 1-year-old Ellie, calling her cute and vowing to protect her forever. At age 4, he insisted on feeding her himself, and at age 7, he caused a commotion by trying to bathe her. A more recent memory shows a 12-year-old Elric banging on 10-year-old Ellie's locked door, shouting that he would sleep beside her, while staff chased him down the hall. The flashback ends, noting his obsession has only doubled since he was 3. Back in the present, Ellie cries that her brother is clingy, creepy, and terrifying, though she admits he's only ever affectionate as a brother and she's never felt unsafe. Her father tells her that Elric enrolled in the academy only because she did, so it will be impossible to keep him away. Thomas then announces his plan. He intends to formally introduce Elric to His Highness. He reminds the staff that Elric once rudely refused the prince's offer to be a retainer, an offer nobody refuses, claiming he only cares about Ellie. While His Highness kindly laughed off the incident, Thomas insists they cannot allow Elric to interfere with Ellie's future. Ellie's mother enthusiastically agrees, declaring that Ellie must become His Highness's bride because it's the only way to protect her from her own brother. Thomas quietly reflects that their family might be the only one in history pushing for a royal marriage specifically to keep their daughter safe from her brother. The household staff agrees with the plan, with one servant noting that while Elric sees the prince as a rival, he isn't stupid. He understands instinctively that crossing His Highness would be fatal. Ellie confirms that the prince's visit is set for 5 days from now. With determination, Thomas and the entire staff rally, declaring the upcoming meeting, Operation Contain Elric. Ellie simply watches them, wondering why everyone is so enthusiastic about this. The day of His Highness's surprise home visit has arrived, and Ellie is instructed to get dressed up for the occasion. With only 1 hour remaining until the prince's arrival, Ellie's father, Thomas, conducts a final check, asking if all preparations are complete. The household staff begins reporting in with military precision, as one man confirms the second floor's Block 3 is prepared, while another staffer reports the third floor has been completely closed off, and a third announces that Block 2 on the second floor is also ready. The meticulous preparations continue as the staff reports that the first floor is all clear and the front garden is set. Another guard confirms the second floor, Block 1, is also ready. Thomas, looking exactly like a drill sergeant, commands his staff that no one can let their guard down until His Highness has been safely welcomed and seen off. He then demands a status update on the target. The staff reports that the target, Elric, is currently in his room occupied with making My Ellie doll. He is shown admiring a dress for it, much to Ellie's visible horror. Thomas commands his team to continue tracking the target and to ensure Elric does not cross paths with His Highness until the signal is given. As her mother informs her they must go prepare to greet the prince, Ellie is already feeling her life draining away from the stress, desperately wishing she could just run far away. Ellie, looking completely worn out, tries to compose herself, thinking she needs to restore her HP and sanity points. She accidentally bites her tongue while declaring she'll do her best. Thomas then advises her that her best weapon is her smile, instructing her to keep smiling. As her parents walk away, her mother warns her father to stay alert, reminding him that Elric is capable of anything. As Ellie's parents march off with grim determination, 2 of Prince Leonard's attendants observe the scene. One attendant comments that while he had a hunch, the family's vibe is definitely off. The other attendant, Noel Gray, notes that their art style seems to have changed and wonders if the family is marching off to war. Meanwhile, Prince Leonard, Noel Gray, and another attendant are discussing official business. They review the Academy's new security plan, which is now finalized and ready for enrollment. Prince Leonard remarks that Ellie would have been thrilled to join their discussion, but she was unfortunately occupied with royal duties. Noel confirms that the plan, which involves combining royal guards with Academy guards, has been shared with their side as well. An attendant then hands Prince Leonard a document, identifying it as Lady Elizabeth's essay, just as he had promised. Leonard thanks him and accepts the paper, noting the topic appears to be about flood control, and mentions they will handle the rest on site. Prince Leonard reads the essay's full, complex title, The Memory of the Eam River and Its Polluted Tributaries. The Mizuho Project and Economic Implications. The attendant happily explains that the history lecturer was delighted with it, praising Ellie for viewing history as a lesson for the future and expressing a strong desire for her to major in history. However, he adds that the engineering and economics lecturers are also vying for her. Leonard smiles warmly, agreeing that it is indeed hard to pin down her specialty. The attendant then mentions there is one more thing, and Leonard looks at another paper in confusion, wondering if Ellie really wrote about examining miracles. This second paper is revealed to be a summary of her baking failure, where she questioned why her cookie came out inedible, harder than stone, even though she followed the recipe perfectly. This query apparently caused waves of laughter, and the chemistry and physics lecturers absolutely loved it. Prince Leonard laughs, figuring she must have really hated that cookie, while Noel dryly comments that the cookie was mysterious. Noel then notices a box and asks Prince Leonard if it is a gift from Lady Elizabeth. Leonard confirms that it is, a present to congratulate him for passing, containing a set of cufflinks and a tie pin. The prince feels grateful but is also puzzled, wondering how she prepared this when he hadn't even informed her of his passing yet. The set is adorned with emeralds, matching the color of Ellie's eyes. He realizes she must have prepared it in advance, simply because she believed there was no way he could possibly fail. As they travel, the prince impatiently asks if they haven't arrived yet. Noel assures him they will be there exactly on time, and Leonard replies that he knows, he was just saying. Upon arrival, Prince Leonard formally greets Duke Macnagan, thanking him for receiving him. Thomas gives a slightly nervous reply, just as Prince Leonard turns his attention to Ellie. She thanks him for coming and he smiles, telling her that he has missed her. Ellie's mother then invites the prince for tea, which has been prepared. As they walk, Prince Leonard observes his surroundings, noticing a servant quickly ducking out of sight as he passes. He internally remarks that the house, while feeling just right, is interesting. He observes that the halls are elegant yet strikingly bare of decoration. However, he recognizes that the cups and furniture are of the highest quality, apparent only to a trained eye. He identifies the style as so very Macnagan, pure refinement without being ostentatious. He reflects that this display of true unflaunted power is far more intimidating. After settling in, Prince Leonard announces that he has come today with a proposal, or more accurately, a request. He formally asks if he may be allowed to escort Ellie to and from the academy once the school term begins. To his surprise, both Thomas and his wife react with overwhelming joy, exclaiming that his request is an answered prayer and absolutely perfect. Leonard is inwardly taken aback by their intense happiness, admitting he had feared the request might be seen as presumptuous. Thomas enthusiastically insists that they had, in fact, been hoping to ask the very same thing of him. As Leonard, still puzzled, replies that they don't need to thank him so profusely, he hears a strange noise and turns his attention to Ellie. He asks Ellie if she is personally fine with the arrangement of him escorting her. She agrees but expresses concern that it might be a burden on him. While this is happening, Ellie notices a flurry of activity outside the window, where servants are repeatedly sprinting back and forth. She tries to get the prince's attention, but her mother quickly interjects, firmly telling Ellie to just accept the offer. Her mother silently thinks that this is the only way to prevent Ellie from being trapped in a cramped carriage with him every day. Thomas then interrupts, stating seriously that there is something he must tell His Highness. He apologizes in advance, explaining that while he didn't intend to hide the information, it simply ended up that way. Thomas explains that the matter concerns his son, Elric. As Prince Leonard looks on in confusion, Thomas internally recounts the troubling details he must now share: Elric's love for Ellie, which is really more of an obsession, the fact he refused to be a retainer, and the disturbing "kiss your brother" tickets. After hearing the explanation, Prince Leonard internally wishes Thomas hadn't told him, as it's a disturbing truth he would rather not have known. However, he now perfectly understands their earlier joyous reaction to his offer, realizing they were desperate for any way to keep Elric from sharing a carriage with Ellie. Leonard asks if they couldn't simply use separate carriages, but Thomas bluntly replies, no, stating with certainty that if Ellie is going, Elric will always find a way to board the same carriage. Thomas then turns and asks a servant for Elric's current status. The servant reports that Elric is, at that very moment, selecting clothes for his My Ellie doll. Thomas grimly asks where he is getting the clothes from, and the servant reveals he is taking them from my lady's closet. This news horrifies both parents, who exclaim, "What the hell?" and question why the doll even exists in the first place. The chaos escalates as Marina, identified as Ellie's maid and guard, bursts in and frantically reports that Elric is back in Ellie's room. Another staff member laments that the young master's stealth now seems to surpass even Marina's. Ellie is aghast, struck by the terrifying thought that this house is dangerous. Prince Leonard, looking deeply concerned, states that this is bad and immediately makes a second proposal to the Duke. He asks if he may bring Ellie to live at the palace. Her parents are overcome with gratitude, asking how they could ever possibly repay him. Leonard explains that he believes it would ease Ellie's mind as well, and he turns to her, formally asking if she would like to live at the palace. Prince Leonard gently informs her that her room is already prepared. Ellie is momentarily confused, admitting she had forgotten about that. He then clarifies that her room is the Crown Princess chambers, located right next to his own. When he asks the Duke and Duchess if they have any objections, they both immediately and gladly agree to the arrangement. In that very instant, a servant announces that the young lady's luggage is already packed and ready to go. Both Ellie and Prince Leonard are left blinking in stunned silence at the incredible speed of the household staff. The entire staff then lines up to congratulate Ellie on her move. Prince Leonard is completely bewildered, wondering how they are all perfectly in sync when he had only proposed the idea moments ago. At this point, Noelle Gray steps forward, asking the Duke's pardon and requesting permission to ask a question, which Thomas grants. Noelle asks what all the hand signs were that he had seen the staff, and even Ellie, using earlier in the day. The other attendant chimes in, admitting he was wondering the same thing. Thomas simply explains that the hand signs are a tradition of House Macnagan. Marina then demonstrates one of the signs, which is identified as meaning target, capture, leaving Noelle and his companion just as confused as before. Thomas and his wife see Prince Leonard and Ellie off to the carriage. Thomas formally asks His Highness to please look after their daughter, to which Leonard gives his word. As they depart, the prince finds it creepy that all the servants are bowing deeply, noting that it feels as though they are worshipping him. Once inside the carriage, Ellie sincerely thanks Leon-sama. He gently tells her not to thank him, insisting that he is just being selfish. He lifts her chin and smiles, adding that having Ellie right beside him every day is something that makes him very happy. His words cause Ellie to blush, and she looks away flustered. A small panel shows the attendants' reactions in the following carriage, with Noelle Gray wondering if his abs can survive the romantic tension all the way to the palace. Prince Leonard's internal monologue then continues, revealing that the Duke and Duchess later informed him that Ellie's essay on the Eam River flood control was in reality an Elric rehabilitation program. Their plan was to put Elric in charge of the project, which they estimated would keep him isolated for 5 to 6 years. This final revelation leads Prince Leonard to conclude that House Macnagan is not a mystery, but a complete madhouse. In an epilogue, it's shown that the servants later built a shrine to Prince Leonard, and he reflects that they worshipped him daily, though he remained unaware of it at the time. Inside the carriage, Prince Leonard explains to Ellie that while they can now go to school together from the palace each morning, his royal duties might prevent him from returning with her in the evenings. Ellie, showing her understanding, says she would still be happy if they could share meals when he has time. Leonard agrees, thinking that her happiness is all that matters, and he looks forward to experiencing student life with her at the entrance ceremony. A flashback reveals Prince Leonard's decision-making process from 2 years prior, when he was 14. He knew that royals traditionally do not attend school, as they receive education from top tutors. However, he was also aware that his public duties would increase significantly once he turned 18. Realizing that he could barely find time for tea with Ellie even then, he decided he wanted to attend school with her before he lost even more time. His parents granted his request, noting it was his very first, selfish request, as their son and that it was their role to grant it. A grateful Leonard thanked them and immediately began working to resolve the issues necessary for his enrollment. The flashback continues, showing Leonard's process for selecting his retainers. He observed his attendant candidates, including a chattering Leonard Ernest who was asking when he would meet the prince's fiancée. Another candidate, the prickly man from the library, told him to chatter less and work more. Prince Leonard mused that he would introduce Ellie in due time, after his retainers were decided. He reflected on Leonard Ernest, the second son of Marquis Ernest, who had a talented older brother working in the ministry. He felt this comparison made Ernest stubborn and considered asking Ellie for an idea on how to handle him. Prince Leonard then thought about how Marquis Ernest seemed convinced his son would be chosen, even though Leonard felt he wasn't worth a single arm. He asked his guard, Noelle Gray, if Ellie had been visiting the library often for her papers, which Noelle confirmed. Leonard then wondered if he could ask Ellie to handle the candidate, and Noelle simply replied, "As you wish." Just 3 days later, the first retainer was secured. Leonard recalled Ellie's assessment. She had predicted that if the candidate didn't respond to her challenge, he would die, meaning he was a quick learner. Next, Leonard focused on Paul Nelson, the third son of the kingdom's largest trading company. Leonard had recognized Paul's intelligence and unique economic theories years ago and, wanting that brain power for the country, had essentially forced him to become a candidate. The prince's flashback then goes even further back to when he was 8 years old and had his first conversation with Noelle. He met the 16-year-old knight, Noelle Simmons, and correctly deduced that Noelle, the second son of Marquis Simmons, planned to leave his house. Noelle explained he already lived in the night dorms and that he wanted to wield a sword, to protect, not to kill. The young prince noted this was a difficult goal. Leonard reflects that Noelle has guarded him with a subtle presence ever since. Returning to the timeline of 2 years ago, Ellie, then age 10, asks the pensive prince if he is tired. He snaps out of his thoughts and assures her he is fine. Ellie expresses a desire to watch the knight's training, but Leonard, while privately just wanting to be with her and worrying about her adorably clumsy nature, decides she can only observe. Their conversation is interrupted by a loud young man, Maurice Sandal, shouting for his highness. Leonard, annoyed, points out that Maurice came uninvited and tells him to get back to training. Maurice, however, beams and declares his goal to become the prince's knight. When Leonard asks what is most important for a knight, Maurice bellows, strength, causing Ellie to think he's too loud. Leonard then asks why, if strength is so important, Maurice isn't training right now. Later, Ellie comments that Maurice is still a child, but Leonard reveals Maurice is actually his age. He explains that Sandal, the knight commander's son, was forced on him as a potential guard but is troublesome. Leonard believes anyone who thinks strength alone is enough will eventually break. Ellie agrees, noting Maurice is a musclehead who, all brawn, no brain, and didn't even understand he was being told to return to training. Ellie suggests that choosing a knight might involve balancing factions, but Leonard dismisses this as a minor issue. He says what's more important is age, as it's best if a lifelong knight is close in age to their master. Ellie counters that this is all the more reason to choose someone he truly trusts. When Leonard asks for her standard, she smiles brightly, saying she would choose someone she can truly trust, someone who, no matter what, would never stab me in the back. Hearing her harsh words, Leonard is moved and mentally appoints her as his chief knight retainer. Following this, the king is seen speaking with Noel, commenting that Leonard made a good choice, thanks to Ellie. He refers to Noel as Viscount Grey, noting that Noel had refused the lands offered by Marquis Simmons, content with the title alone. Leonard's monologue concludes his retainer selection. With Paul and Noel, the second one, secured, he brushed Sandal aside. His third choice was Robert Arist. The Arist dukedom is the highest in the kingdom and home to Ringlitsama, the girl who ruined Ellie's first tea party. Robert had recently replaced his father as head of the house. During their meeting, Robert explains his family's situation. His father and sister were forgiven by the queen, but he feels he must serve. Leonard reveals he knows Robert studied law at Steinford specifically to legally remove his father from power. Leonard recounts how the former duke foolishly appealed to the queen after the tea party debacle, calling the punishment too harsh even though Ellie was younger and the event was royal hosted. This act of defiance against the queen, who shares the king's burdens and title of Your Majesty, was checkmate, as it only incurred her displeasure. Robert explains his mother had given them good tutors and warned them to watch your father carefully, predicting he would make a mistake someday. When his father defied the queen, Robert thought, finally. His dismissal was forced by charges of disrespect, excessive spending, and other crimes. Robert, respecting his grandfather who once spent his fortune developing a cure for the plague, states he also wants to use his power for the country. Hearing this, Leonard extends his hand and asks Robert to lend me that power. Robert kneels, devoting his life to the prince and the nation. With Paul, Noel, and Robert secured, Leonard's final choice was his cousin, Hendrik Orchard. He notes that he had first asked Ellie's brother, Elric, who instantly refused. Leonard now thinks that, knowing Elric's nature, this was fair enough. With his retainers and exams settled, he just had to wait for enrollment. The scene snaps back to the present, inside the carriage. Leonard tells Ellie he is perfectly ready for school, especially with Ellie by my side. They are almost at the palace, where a welcome party awaits her. Ellie expresses her happiness, and a small thought bubble from Noel shows he thinks the prince looks just as happy. Leonard tells Ellie he is glad she wore the necklace, adding that it suits her, Princess Lineria Foyabelle Crane, Prince Leonard's younger sister, who is curtsying. She is speaking with Ellie and Leonard, asking if their preparations for enrollment are complete. Both Ellie and Leonard confirm that they are ready and have no issues. Lineria smiles, saying she is glad and asking them to tell her all about their school life once it begins, which Ellie agrees to. Lineria then mentions that when she was little, she was actually afraid of her brother. Prince Leonard, hearing this, asks his sister if it is all right for her to be away from her official duties. Lineria beams, reassuring him that she has already finished her schedule for the day and that she also wanted time to talk with Ellie. This causes Leonard to think to himself that he had wanted time alone with Ellie. Just then, an attendant arrives to speak with His Highness, so Leonard excuses himself for a moment. Once he leaves, Lineria turns to Ellie, sympathetically suggesting her exams must have been difficult and noting she heard Ellie spent all her time in the library. Ellie, however, smiles and says it was not difficult at all, as she planned to study there anyway. She also adds that she is very happy to be able to go to school with Leonard. Lineria smiles warmly at this and thanks Ellie for doing that, implying it was for her brother's benefit. Lineria then begins to reflect on her upbringing as royalty, explaining that their lives are supported by the people's taxes and that wastefulness is never permitted. She was raised on the principle that she must live for the people who keep you alive, though she admits this was a very difficult lesson for her to understand as a child. A flashback shows a young Lineria recalling how selfish and spoiled she used to be. She hated studying and preferred dolls, hated books unless they had pictures, hated etiquette lessons because she just wanted to play, and hated vegetables because they were bitter. Her brother, Leonard, however, was completely different. He would patiently explain that studying becomes one's strength, that books expand one's world with knowledge, that manners are promises to keep others comfortable, and that vegetables nourish the body, requiring thanks for those who grew and cooked them. The flashback continues with a young Lineria pouting, complaining that she doesn't understand what her brother means and that when she hates something, she just hates it. She reflects that her brother never once said he hated anything. He never scolded her or their younger sister, Mary Rose, but would only smile gently and pat their heads. This emotional distance is what frightened her when she was 6 years old. Even when he smiled, it felt as though he had left his emotions behind. It was around this time that she learned her brother was engaged. Her mother explained that his fiancée was Lady Elizabeth Menegan, who was 1 year younger than Lineria. Lineria recalls her parents, the king and queen, discussing the Menegan family. The king mentioned that the duke rarely comes to court and that some people look down on them for not participating in politics. He called the family unusual but fine, adding that if they ever wanted to, they had the power to take the throne itself, though he laughed this off as something that would never happen. The young Lineria, overhearing this, was confused. She thought about her always calm brother and pitied his fiancée, Elizabeth, believing she would have a hard life sharing the heavy burden of the crown with him. The flashback shifts to the engagement banquet, which was the first time Lineria met Ellie. A young Ellie, after speaking with the king, approached Lineria. Ellie introduced herself as Elizabeth Menegan and said it was her greatest honor to meet her. Lineria was immediately struck by how much Ellie looked like a doll and felt she had lost in comparison. Lineria gasped and gave a clumsy greeting. Prince Leonard then gently took Ellie's hand, suggesting they move somewhere quieter, and Ellie agreed. Lineria was shocked when her brother called the girl Ellie, a nickname he had never used for her or her sister. She couldn't help but compare Ellie's graceful gestures to her own. Once seated, Ellie apologized for her own poor greeting, admitting she lacked proper manners. Lineria, surprised, confessed that she also found manners difficult, boring, and pointless. Ellie then asked if she could also call Lineria by a nickname, just as Lineria had asked to call her Ellie, which Ellie had happily agreed to. Ellie then used the game of tag as an example. She explained the rules. One person chases, and when they touch someone, that person becomes the chaser. Ellie then posed a question. What if one child refused to follow the rules, claiming they didn't know them or that chasing was boring? Lineria immediately recognized that the game wouldn't be fun at all. Ellie explained that if someone breaks the rules, the other players will feel it's not how it should be and will stop enjoying the game. She compared the rules of tag directly to manners, calling them the rules that allow everyone to play together peacefully. Lineria suddenly understood this was what her brother meant when he called manners rules to stay together, or promises that keep others comfortable. Ellie's explanation made it so easy to grasp. A grateful Lineria thanked Ellie and promised to work harder at her etiquette studies. Back in the present, Lineria chuckles, recalling how much they talked after that. The flashback shows young Lineria asking Ellie how she knew so much. Ellie replied that most of it was in books and that Lineria should read more than picture books. When Lineria complained that studying wasn't fun, Ellie advised her to focus on the why, because understanding why makes learning fun, a concept Lineria quickly agreed felt good. In the present, Lineria reflects that it was thanks to Ellie that she grew to enjoy studying, which led to people calling her a prodigy. But Lineria feels that Ellie is the one truly worthy of that title. She then turns to Ellie and asks if she may ask her another question. Lineria looks at her seriously and asks if Ellie truly has any complaints about marrying her brother. Ellie answers immediately that she has none at all. She explains that Prince Leonard himself told her that they would open the path together and walk it side by side. Ellie states with confidence that she believes in his words. Lineria is deeply moved, thinking that her brother, who could always do everything by himself, had said he was to walk with Ellie. She apologizes for her rude question, admitting it was foolish to ask. Lineria thinks about the political reality of the engagement. Ellie will one day be queen, and she surely understands the weight of that burden even better than Lineria does. And yet, Ellie still says without hesitation that she trusts him. As Lineria is lost in these thoughts, Ellie asks if she said something. Lineria just giggles and says it was nothing, quietly thanking Ellie for meeting her brother. At that moment, Prince Leonard returns, apologizing for the interruption. Leonard explains that something urgent has come up and he must leave. He apologizes to Ellie, promising to make it up to her later, and tells them to enjoy their time. As he turns to go, he casually says, "What's wrong, Lena?" Lineria freezes in shock, pointing out that he just called her Lena. She becomes visibly excited, asking why he's so surprised, exclaiming that he has never used a nickname for her before, always insisting on the formal Lineria. She excitedly asks Ellie if she was the one who convinced her stubborn brother to change. Ellie just laughs, pointing out to Leonard how happy his sister is. She explains that she had simply asked him why he didn't use affectionate nicknames for his sisters, especially since such names are for people he cares about, and she herself is happy to be called Ellie by him. Leonard, blushing slightly, acts surprised by the question. He looks at his sisters and says, "Lena and Rose," telling them it's obvious because they are both his precious little sisters. He then wishes them well and departs. As he leaves, Lineria reflects on how much her brother has changed since meeting Ellie. She thinks about the two thrones and the heavy burdens her brother and Ellie will have to carry, burdens that cannot be shared by others. Seeing Ellie standing strong beside him, Lineria feels a new desire. She wants to find a way to support both of them and make their burden even just a little lighter. She doesn't know what she can do yet, but she wants to use her strength for the kingdom and its people, and especially for her beloved brother and for Ellie. She knows that this newfound purpose is all thanks to Ellie.